Hi everybody and welcome to episode 3. In this episode we're going to be looking at the 1930s. So we're going to be looking at things like the development of indirect fire and the dial sight. We're also going to be looking at how the uniforms and equipment changed in the 1930s for the British Army, in the introduction of new uniforms and new web and load-bearing equipment. We're also going to be looking at what if the Vickers, water-cooled Vickers, was replaced by an air-cooled machine gun, such as the Americans and the Germans were developing at this time. We're also going to then be looking at different small arms that were introduced in the 1930s, because it's quite a period for the development of submachine guns, for instance. So we're going to be looking at that. So, Rich, what's different in the dugout for the 1930s?
So the British Army's moved on a little bit. It's an interesting crossover period because you could still talk about the end of the First World War in the early 30s, and you can talk about the start of the Second World War in the late 1939. You know, it does start then. But what we've changed on the gun, we've just upgraded our 1920s gun to suit a bit of the indirect fire. So we've got this bar 4 sight on the front here. I'll talk about a bit more of that later on. And then this blast deflector. So one of the things about the characteristics of machine gunnery, one of the disadvantages are sight, sound, smell kind of thing, in that blast gives away your position. When you're firing that, the muzzle gases come out full 360 and they just throw up any dust. It gives you a cloud, gives you away.
Yeah, straight away, yeah. Which you can see from some distance.
Yeah, so that just directs it forward. It stops that dust being picked up. Works really well. We've done a video on that actually, so showing it on the range in use. And not much else changes on the gun until the very late 30s, which I'll talk about as a bit.
Excellent.
And the kit doesn't change at all, really, 1920s to 1930s, other than what Tom's going to talk about from the collection.
Brilliant.
If you like what you're watching and you want to see more, leave a comment on YouTube and we'll give one person from those comments each episode a month's free subscription to Patreon, where you can access all of our archive and the firing videos that go alongside this series. We'll also, because we don't want to leave you out, any patrons that leave comments on the Patreon site for that video, we are going to select one from across the series and send you a copy, wherever you are, one copy of the Pride of the LMGs book that we retail. Obviously, terms and conditions will apply, so please have a read of those before you enter any of those competitions.
1930s, got in front of us the Lewis gun. Rich, what can you tell us about what was happening with the Lewis gun at this point?
So we've got the Lewis has been in service now since late 1914, 15. Everybody is going to be changing. The 30s, like, period of mechanisation, rearmament, the whole 10-year plan, which is the politics around, if we don't expect a war within 10 years, we don't need to spend on defence, or arms, as it was referred to at that point. So this has lived through the 20s, coming out of the First World War, and we're looking to replace it. Yeah. And we really look at just a few different options, 2 of which are on the table. The ZB, which we've got represented here by what does eventually replace it. You know, it's no secret the Bren replaces it. You know, this example. And then the Vickers Berthier, and I think that's a lot of overlooked elements. We certainly see at events, people just think that's a Bren. Oh, look, you've got a load of Brens in the corner. No, we've got Vickers Berthiers. Yeah. So there are iterations of this, and we'll cover some of those differently. This is the Mark III, which is the Vickers Berthier that does actually end up in service to replace the Lewis, but not in the British Army, in the Indian Army. So we adopt the Bren, and this is a Mark I, a simplified Mark I that would come along in sort of 1940, 41. But the Vickers Berthier was adopted by the Indians because they knew they were going to be at the bottom of the list for any Bren gun production.
Okay.
And there's some politics in this as well.
So they got ahead of the game a little bit by...
possibly. Yeah, they got ahead of their game. Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. So the intent by the British was to replace the Lewis with a firearm that they could control, the British government could control production of. So it wasn't just an off-the-shelf thing. Yeah. They needed work in the Royal Small Arms Factory at Enfield, and these were made by Birmingham Small Arms, American design. Right. Then the arms arms companies of Belgium took Captain Lewis's design and started producing it. Belgium obviously isn't the best place to produce firearms in the First World War. There's a lot of Germans in most of it. And so Birmingham Small Arms, BSA, produced the Lewis. The British are still having to buy those in. And they realise that actually, so the politics of weapons purchasing in the First World War, the Royal Small Arms Factory isn't making any machine guns. It has the capability to make Maxims, but the Army's gone away from that. Right. So it's doing refurbs of Maxims largely, and pistols and Enfields and rifles, but it's machine guns. That there was an intent to build a national machine gun factory, which is where the Lewises and the Vickers and everything we've made. Vickers said, we've got factory capacity in Kent. Why do you want to do that? And it wasn't until quite late on in the war, like early 1918, that the British government said to Vickers, any machine guns you make, we'll buy. Before that, they'd be going, we want another 400. We want another 200. Right. So Vickers would make 200 and then go, all right, we've made them. We'll wait for another order. So it wasn't until quite late on. So this politics problem exists around the Lewis as well. And as we get into it, the Bren, being a Czech design ZB or Bruno, were quite happy to say, just make them. Crack on and make them. Whereas Vickers are saying, why would we let you make them north of the river to make our factory south of the river redundant, basically? These are being made in Crayford. What happens then? They do quite well together in the trials, and we've got all of the Small Arms Committee minutes and everything on Patreon. So if you want to read those trials, actually all of the notes are there. And they do quite well together. But that politics bit sits behind it. Now, because Vickers lose to the ZB, in the end, Vickers say, well, you can make them in India, we don't care. It's one of those, well, if we haven't got that contract, you can't make them, we can't sustain the factory and then ship them all the way to India. So this one's actually made in Ishapur in India. And largely the Indian Army keep these until about 1943. Right. And you do see them in the Far East, early periods of the Far East, with not just Indian Army units, because obviously British regiments had battalions in the Indian Army, so you see them in there. And you see some in North Africa, because they've come sort of across with the 4th and the 10th Indian Divisions. And then you see them spread out a little bit, and then you see the Czechs being used them, because they happen to be, they just start to pop up, and you can really always spot them by the muzzle attachment differences, because if you start to look at the back, you just get confused here. But there are, the key thing for the Indians as well, or the Indian Army, is that their Lewis guns have been used quite heavily in the Northwest Frontier and in a lot of the policing actions. So their Lewises really do need replacing. And if the British Army is going to stop the supply of spare parts and things for the Lewis, then we're going to run out. So they do need to go to something much more quicker than waiting for the Brents. And it was the right thing to do, because otherwise they would have had these for much, much longer. One of the problems with the Lewis was obviously the use of 1908 pattern equipment. And as we were looking to mechanise, these don't fit in pouches very easily. So Bren gun magazines do. So you've got this whole quite holistic approach. In geeky academic world, you've got this system of systems that is all interrelated. So we change the magazine type, we can change the pouches. If we change the pouches, it means we've got a much more utilitarian type of setup. We can change lots more in that period as well. Excellent.
So the Vickers Berthier is a reliable and perfectly functioning weapon. It just lost out to Enfield contract-wise, basically. Right, okay, that's interesting.
Well, we would say that because it's a Vickers. But other people can debate that, but that's our view and we're sticking to it.
Okay. Okay, so what is everybody else doing at this stage?
So they're looking to replace their First World War firearms as well. And the Germans are moving from the MG08 to the MG34. Quite a different transition. And they've got I'm going to say opportunity and I'm weak on this one, but this is sort of the politics of the Weimar Republic and how the Versailles Treaty happened and things in the restriction of machine guns that they had, in that they sort of had a blank sheet of paper to work with because they'd been reduced so much that they had no system to replace. They were just going, what do we need from a blank sheet of paper? And we needed a universal machine gun. So they went to the MG34 that can be used in the light or the heavy role, and therefore can replace their MG08 and create a new light machine gun as well. Right. So any Madsons or the 0815s and stuff, it's going to replace all those with a single system. The Americans are actually a bit slower off the mark with some of this stuff, in my understanding of things. I'm putting a few caveats in here, but they're slower off the mark because they don't have a war pending in 10 years.
Exactly. They're more of a police force at this point, aren't
they? So the 1919 is in place and they're going to put that on their vehicles and their tanks and stuff. So they're not looking to change anything, and they don't need to. And even in British service, that still ends up in the 70s in some armoured vehicles. Yeah. So the Browning system is still in service today. With the Browning 50s and things like that, that's still in service. That system works. They didn't change it. So the Germans change everything. We do some tweaking and transitioning. The Americans didn't change anything.
Right, so thank you for joining us. For those on YouTube, we'll be going back to the Dugout, and for our Patreon members, we'll be going to the range. Thank you. Okay, so let's talk what if. And what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about what if the water-cooled Vickers machine gun was actually replaced by air-cooled machine guns. So what have we got on the table in front of us, Richard?
So we've got the Browning M1919, which is arguably a development of the Browning M1917, which was a water-cooled machine gun, and then this is an air-cooled version of that. And then we've got the MG34, which was the Germans' development. It's not an air-cooled version of an MG08. It's not a Maxim system, but it is, they changed their gun completely.
So it's a brand new development?
Yeah, right. Yeah. But they did make air-cooled versions of the Vickers. So you've got very basically, if Tom just moves that one out of the way for a minute, you've got very basically air-cooled Vickers. You just cut some holes in it.
Right. So it's just got vents in the
It's just got vents in it, yeah. So this is an air service Vickers though. Right. And this is a Colt-made M1918. So we're very lucky that here in the UK, we've managed to find the Colt M1918 and the Colt M1915, the American-made Vickers. So this is all in 30-06. And we're only missing one, which is the 11mm version of this. Right. So, one day. This has actually been set up for ground use and not aircraft use. But you can see over here that we've got the cutaway. This is the Mark 1 Star Vickers as well. So this is all set up to fire between the propeller blades. Sometimes I say through the propeller, and I don't mean that bit. Yeah. But it's set up so that you can do it. So that is an air-cooled version of the Vickers. But it's not what you mean, is it?
Okay,
you don't mean that.
No, it's not.
You mean this kind of thing, ground service, because obviously this will only last for about 400 to 600 rounds before it starts to go, no, I'm not made for that.
But that isn't a problem when you've got it attached to an aircraft and you can't.
No, because you've got constant airflow.
Well, you've got constant airflow and you can't change the magazine.
You've probably got about 400 rounds. So if you were going to, if this had become air-cooled, you'd have had to build a heavier barrel around it like that. Right. If we'd have done that, then we'd have lost the capability to do the sustained fire that we intended to do. It's not a technological decision. It's a doctrine-based decision. The Germans and the Americans did not intend doing sustained fire in the same way.
So in sustained fire roll with a water jacket on, you're looking at about 1,000 rounds before it starts to heat up. Is that right?
Before it starts to boil up,
Yeah, so then, 10,000 rounds before you haven't literally changed the barrel? Not sustained 10,000.
10,000 rounds barrel life before you want to start checking it.
Yeah.
But that can go longer. If you're not firing at the rapid rate, so the fast rate, you can carry on.
But with air-cooled, that's cut right, that sustained
you sort of just have to stop after a couple of thousand rounds.
Because it's getting on.
Done.
Yeah.
You start to get too much expansion in the metalwork of the barrel and things like that. It's when metal gets hot. And then that expansion stops things moving.
Right.
And you can't build tolerance in because then it'll just be slack and it won't be accurate. So there's so many technological plays that the Americans retained the 1917 A1 for their sustained fire jobs. So the water-cooled machine guns are kept. The 1919 is then being used on the, in the lighter machine gun role.
So it's developed for all use other than sustained fire.
Pretty much, yeah.
But we stay with the water-cooled Vickers because it works so well in a sustained fire role. Right.
So this comes to, again, the sort of that thinking of how the armies are developing at this point, in that we've got the Germans put in their light machine gun role, so universal machine gun, in that it can be used on aircraft, vehicles, and the infantry, and it has a whether it's truly sustained fire or not, but it has a heavier role. It's not a heavy machine gun. The Germans referred to the Schwer. It's Schwer roll, which is heavy translated, but it's not heavy. It's it's not a Browning. It's not what we'd call a heavy machine gun. The Americans have the automatic rifle, the BAR that we've seen, and then the Browning 30 cal, and then they have the water-cooled machine gun off of that. We've kept with a light machine gun, which in this period is the Bren that we've gone to, and a Vickers.
It's that Venn diagram of what you want it to do, and each country's sort of like got a slightly larger or smaller sort of encompassation. The British have decided let's sort of.
And I think as well, one thing to be very mindful of is in the 30s is arguably if the war hadn't started when it did, we might have ended up with an air-cooled gun. So we were so focused on mechanisation, and we were looking for our own version of a universal machine gun, which was the Beezer. So the 7.92mm Beezer, that Mauser round, that we were actually looking to move towards, not 303, we sort of almost had enough of that, old hat. So we're looking to use the 7.92 Mauser round. We adopted the Beezer in that Beezer, and we were going to use that as the LMG. But because we still had this demand for sustained fire, it didn't happen.
Right.
And I think...
So we see the Beezer in some soft-skinned and armoured vehicles. But that would have been used in an infantry role then?
Yeah, the intent was an MMG role with an infantry role, which is like the ZB-37. So you might come across that gun, and we don't have one here. But the ZB-37 is the Beezer in that role in a different world, and the Germans did use it in that role as well. The Vickers was being used in armoured vehicles. We sort of realised that the Beezer could be used in armoured vehicles, so let's go to that. I think we went to that with the intent that we would take the Vickers out of normal infantry service as well, because then you've got the same firearm across all loads of different services, standardisation. Loads of these parts are compatible with the Mark 4, the Mark 5, the Mark 4, Mark 6 and 7, which are the armoured fighting vehicle guns. But we didn't do that. Right. We went Beezers completely over there. And then, of course, by the end of the Second World War, we end up with Beezers, Brownings. And standardisation goes out the window when you just need lots of everything. So we did do air-cooled Vickers. We just decided, we as the British Army decided, it's just not for us. Right. So it's an interesting tale of that development in the 30s.
So Tom, can you tell us about the development of the uniforms and equipment in the 1930s?
So we get into the 1930s, still with the service dress from the end of the First World War, but with the development of everything else, British Army wants to develop the uniform to go with it, more modern. So they go to the Surge BD, which you can see here, same material, but a much, much shorter mid-waist cut tunic. The trousers obviously came up, overlap. Covered buttons, unlined collar. So, and just to get rid of one of these myths that is out there, there is no such thing as the 1937 pattern BD. Right. It's Surge BD, then 1940 pattern, then 1940 pattern austerity.
So that's a collectivism.
Yeah, it is, and it's just one of those things that's come over. Developed, I believe, from a skiing, alpine skiing. Outfit, yeah. So it's sort of active, you can move around more in it. And
Developed by people that have never worn it. Then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because as soon as you put braces on, it's impossible to wear and move around with it.
Yeah. You get 2 buttons in the back of your head every time you bend over to pick something up. So this replaces the service dress in 1937. And then on top of that is why redevelop your basic uniform if you're not going to redevelop your webbing as well, which links into the development of the small arms as well. So we do have 1937 pattern webbing. So smaller, because you're getting the introduction of the Bren gun into the infantry as well as the light machine gun, and every soldier would have had at least 2 Bren mags in the pouches, as well as their individual kit as well.
That would have been like a bandolier of 303 or hand grenades.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Whatever I'm sure there was an official list of what you were supposed to put in the pouches.
I think it's 50 round bandolier in one pouch, and a couple of grenades on top, and then 2 Bren mags in the other one for the infantry section.
And then there would have been the entrenching tool at the back and your bayonet frog as well.
You can't carry Bren mags in these.
No.
Unless they're really small Bren mags. And so you'd be sort of constrained, and Lewis gun mags had to be carried over the top of it. So you can actually, the utility of the basic pouch is really strong.
And of course, this tunic's using up a lot of material, isn't it? It's unnecessarily, really, when we consider we've taken it off this jacket.
But your tummy still needs covering, so just add a bit more to the trousers.
Just make the trousers longer,
We've got that set up actually with small arm school corps collar badges on, which is a bit transitional. So you mentioned that service dress goes out in 37, and we still see it in the BEF photos in 1940, and it still exists during the Second World War as well. And pipers still get a set, and bandsmen and stuff like that. So, but we've got that set up as an instructor from the small arms school at Netheravon, so the machine gun wing. So he's got brass collars on. This is based on a real photo, and he's then got the WO2 crowns there, and just above those, you can't see it because of the bottom of the basic pouch, but we've got crossed machine guns because he was a machine gun instructor, but all brass on the Surge Black, and that shouldn't have happened. That was very much what they were trying to get away from with that simplification.
And introducing cloth insignia.
Cloth insignia as well,
But I suppose there's some diehards, isn't there, that like the brass collar dogs and, like their brass insignia.
And then the only thing, is the introduction of Blanco, KG3.
Yes, that's sort of traditionally late war, isn't it? That late Second World War, so a bit later than what we represent. And I think those are Mark II pouches rather than the Mark I and things. But 37 pattern equipment comes in 1937 and stays there for a very long time, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about some of the technical developments.
Absolutely,
And so I mentioned in the intro that the gun doesn't really change that much, but
So, sorry to interrupt you. This is the same gun we saw in episode 2.
It is. Okay. It's the same gun. There was no point changing it for anything else. Those guns would still be in the 30s. And the British Army, as Tom alludes to, the mechanisation is changing everything in the 30s and rearmament. The Vickers is up for replacement. We sort of talked about how it's going to be air-cooled and options are available. But what saves it is the Mark 8Z ammunition. And we've got 303 ammunition. It's going to fit your rifle. It's going to fit the Lewis gun, the Bren gun and everything, and is what's in the Vickers. That's going to stay the same. Sorry, that's externally going to look exactly the same. But internally, that bullet is going to change from a flat-tailed bullet to a boat-tailed bullet. Can you see how they've shaved little tiny amounts? And those tiny amounts mean that range goes from 2,900 yards to 4,500 yards because it's more stable in flight and therefore reaches a higher culminating point. And at that point, it starts to come back down to the ground. So a tiny change like that, that's been in development through the 20s. But as we mentioned, nobody had any money to do much. So 30s is where money's found. Defence budgets expand in the time of threat and crisis. And So that change has a huge impact on how the Vickers is used.
And is it just that shaving? Does the cordite charge change?
They don't use cordite for this.
Right, okay.
They've switched to nitrocellulose in 1917.
Right,
Lots of switches happened then. So Z ammunition. So if you see 7Z, 8Z, that means it's nitrocellulose. They then stopped using the Z, so there's 8s without a Z that people think is called. It's not. It's a Z. Everything's a Z by this point. The Mark 8 has a nitrocellulose charge, and that's going to push it, like I say, 2,900 to 4,500 yards. Yeah. The implications of that tiny change are that we've got the bar foresight you'd be using with the clinometer here. So this clinometer would be used to do elevation. Bar foresight is your traversing, wavy hand traversing, and that's how you set how your gun's going to be used in indirect fire. Now, we'll do a special on indirect fire at some point because it needs fields and stuff to show it properly. But this is the core kit. And this was developed in the 20s, really, end of First World War. And with that Mark 8Z ammunition, it can't really cope, actually. It's outpaced by this. So you have to develop what's called the dial sight. Dial sight in a lovely tin. And these fit onto the side of the Vickers. And it looks a lot more elaborate, doesn't it? So this is ranged up to 4,500 yards. And at that point, the gun's pointing quite high. You'll do full 360 degree traverse with it if you need to. Not that you might need to fire backwards, you'd hope.
Unless you're in trouble.
Unless you're really in trouble. But so that you can, actually, you might be able to set your zero line backwards. So the gun's going to aim, the sight's going to aim backwards, but the gun's aiming forwards because your zero line is a really useful church tower. Like I say, indirect fire. We've done a great infographic on it, haven't you, Matt?
We have.
And it's covered in one of those smaller books. But this is all the peak technological advancement of the Vickers MG. Because once you've got this, it gets really complicated. That's quite complicated to set, but every machine gunner would know how to do that. So the
part of the training.
So the training stuff we've shown know that. But your machine gun officers would need to use things like this. This is a plotter to start to calculate the tangent elevations, quadrant elevations, and everything that you need to do. So you'd be plotting this material. There we go. You start to plot. Basically, you've got the TOG system: target, object, gun.
Right.
So you target, observer, gun potentially, or whatever. So you've got your target, the object you might be aiming at, and where the gun is. So you've got to work out those three things and how they'll relate to each other on a map.
So there's a lot of mathematics involved in.
So these officers.
I shudder to think.
It does it for you. It's a computer to a certain extent.
And then you've got slide rules and stuff that add on top of this. So the developments in the 30s aren't just about let's give them some new web equipment, let's give them a new uniform. It's the technological level of how that stuff works together with this 1912 gun. So we don't have to change barrels to put that new ammunition in. Still the Mark 1, or Mark 2 actually by that point, barrel in a Mark 1 gun. But it is those, you just have to make sure that the barrel you're using has just been used for Mark 8Z.
So is the doctrine changing? Is the training changing to accommodate new equipment and new developments?
So doctrine's changed in that we've got the machine gun battalions. So the reorganisation in the 30s reforms the machine gun corps in essence. It doesn't give them a new cap badge, converts infantry regiments. They've got carriers or trucks, 1,500 weight trucks. They're much more mobile. That's the whole army. At the machine gun level, the machine gun is 100% mechanised. A machine gun battalion, so 100% mechanised.
We've done away with the horses and the limbered wagons.
Limbered wagons gone. Mechanisation, 100% mechanised battalions in largely mechanised infantry divisions in a very mechanised British Army. So at the time of the outbreak of the Second World War, the machine gun battalion is the most mechanised unit of the most mechanised army in the world. So it's everybody's on a truck.
Didn't realise that.
So although that's really heavy tripod, and it's and it's quite a heavy gun, and it needs water and it needs lots of ammunition, it's being moved around largely up until where it needs to be without horses. and that's really important because then once it gets there, it can reach out that 4,500 yards.
And it can move to other locations quickly, rapidly. Yeah.
And reposition, well, more to the point, is reposition for counter battery fire as well.
Huge. Yeah. So huge changes at that point that make it quite interesting.
Okay. So on the back of that, we within the collection itself, we've also got obviously masses of information on training, etc. And what I have in front of me here is the Netheravon attendees list from 1931, and there's just a couple of people I want to pick out of this. This list is brigadier and major and all that kind of level, but we're looking at things like the 12th Infantry Brigade, Royal Tank Corps, 1st Suffolk Regiment, Cameron Highlanders. It's a cross-section of almost every British Army unit. And just a couple of the personalities that I've picked out of here. The first one is a Major Fam Browning, DSO, who 3rd Grenadier Guards, who we knew went on to command British airborne forces in the Second World War. But he's at Netheravon learning the machine gun. And another chap who's very interesting, Colonel Brownrigg, who was General Staff, and he was the military advisor on the film Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, which is quite interesting. And he was criticised somewhat for his decisions that were made in the 1940 evacuation of Calais. But what we'll do is we'll go and have a look at some of this stuff.
Yeah, so that is from a big bundle of training material that would be trying to tell some of these senior officers about some of these new capabilities coming along. I mean, what date's that, Matt? Is that
1931?
So I would imagine early on. Actually.
Yeah, I would imagine most of these men have been involved in the First World War in some way. So they will have that memory of how the gun was used in the First World War, and what we're trying to do at this stage is show them that the development has changed, the capability has changed.
And get them ready for the mechanisation that takes place as time goes on.
So if you want to see more of this type of archive that we've been showing you, then follow us on Patreon. Go along to the Patreon page, support us, and it'll open up a world of things that you didn't think were possible before. It's all on there for you to see. Very quickly before we end the episode, we've got a question from Jake Thorner, and he says, Richard, I have seen a recent Forgotten Weapons Q&A, and Ian talked about the .5 Vickers. Do you agree with his description that the .5 Vickers didn't see much service?
Yeah, we haven't talked about the 0.5-inch Vickers enough. No. We've got a couple in the collection, one of which is a to-be-fired example as well. So the 0.5-inch Vickers is a properly uprated, it's a bigger... I think I talked about in the 20s that you could put any rifle caliber ammunition into a Vickers. You can't put 0.5 inch, it's too big. Yeah. So they made the gun a bit bigger. And in the 30s, it was the main armament for our light tanks and secondary armament for a lot of our other tanks.
So for those of us that don't know particularly, is this the same as 50 cal?
No, it's not the same as a 50 cal Browning. And being pedantic nerds, we do try and, well, I do try and refer to it as the 0.5-inch Vickers to get away from the 50 cal, because the 50 cal Browning, we've got both. We can do some side-by-side stuff. Did not much service? Well, Battle of France 1940 would disagree with you in that it was on every light tank. There's loads of those knocked out tanks. The 15mm Beezer hadn't replaced it yet. We talked about Beezers and things. That hadn't replaced the 0.5-inch Vickers at that point. Italy, North Africa, 0.5-inch Vickers.
Right, okay.
And then pretty much every Royal Navy ship would have banks of 4 of them for anti-aircraft.
So there's quite a bit of service.
Quite a bit of service.
Yeah, okay.
And lots and lots of ammunition made for them. None of it survives though, so we've got to make our own at some point. But
we like a challenge.
Yeah, it certainly did see a lot of service.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so thank you for joining us for this episode. We'd just like to say, if you'd like to support us, which we hope you will, please visit our Patreon page, and there'll be far more information there on the different ways of joining. Thank you for joining us. Goodbye.
Yeah.